Hello, everyone, and welcome. And thank you for joining me today as we unveil the new features of Envisioneer version 17. Very thankful for all of you and those of you that contributed thoughts and ideas that went into all of the new features and functions that went into version 17. Those of you that have been with us from the very beginning, version 1 of Envisioneer, or before that in technology we had before, and for those of you that might be brand new, thanks for joining us. I appreciate all of you coming to spend some time with me this afternoon as we look at the new features of version 17. My name is Chantal, and I'm going to be your host today as we look at all the new features. If you have any questions about version 17, please don't hesitate to use the chat panel and type those in. I'll try to get through all of them as quickly as I can. If time is getting away from us and it's going too long, I'll make sure we reach out to you, each of you individually, with any questions that went unanswered during the webinar. First question that's always asked is, when is it going to be released? Version 17 is slated to be released sometime June, July. We're going to get it out to you as quickly as possible. We're just unveiling some of the things today that are in that version. And then it goes into quality assurance so they can make sure that everything is perfect. They spend the next 30 to 45 days taking a look at everything and making sure that everything's running smoothly before we release it to you. So this is a pre-release webinar just to show you all the good things that are coming towards you in version 17. I am going to take you right in and start showing you some of the new features. You might have noticed in the emails that we sent you and in the version 17 logo that was on the screen before we started the webinar, it's giving a little bit of a nod to walls. We've spent a lot of time in development redoing the walls just so we can incorporate some new technology and how we do the walls and how the functionalities work within the walls themselves. So I'm going to select one of these walls as an example just to get us started and look at the very first new feature, looking at different types of wall styles. I'm going to look at the properties of the walls. For those of you that have been with the software for a while and understand and have seen this dialog box before, you'll see that it is different already. Previously, under the basic tab, you pick the type of wall that you were using. Now we've brought that into a drop-down menu pick. So you can tell it that you're using a framed wall, a general concrete masonry girth or log. So we would just pick the type of wall that we want to use. When we're building up walls now, we're also under here, there used to be another tab that allowed you to define the wall top and bottom. We do that now here with the wall. We give it its overall height. So you can see I've told it that I want to give it a level height, or I could slope the wall, step the wall, or auto extend the wall to meet any roof that is above it. So we've brought that down and condensed it into this dialog box. So everything is here under the basic tab in drop-down pull-downs that you can select. The big difference that you'll see here is this component layout. Every different material that goes into a wall is now viewed as a component. So looking at this wall that we have on the right, we have a stone component, we have a siding component, we have an interior finish component, our drywall. There will be a stud framing component to the wall. There's a sheathing component to the wall. They're all individual components. So let's select the select button and take a look at how these components work together. So in this new part of the dialog box, all of the components are listed on the left. Their properties will appear in the middle. You get a little graphic down below at the overall look of the wall when you update and change any of those components. And we get a nice wall section over here that shows us how all of the different components come together. So we have our interior drywall finish. And when I highlight any of these, you'll also notice to the left that the component highlights itself green, so you can see which one you're dealing with. And then I could add another interior layer if I wanted to, so there could be built up layers on the interior. I have my insulated core. So that insulated core is my 2x6 construction and insulation on the inside of those. I also have my OSB sheathing, and I have composite siding and stone veneer. What you'll notice with the composite siding and the stone veneer is they have absolute heights. So we can see that the siding veneer is offset from the base of the wall, and it starts 4 feet in the air. And the stone veneer sets down itself 1 foot from the base of the wall, so it'll cover any floor joists that happen in along there. And then it's got a 4-foot wall height. So now we can put those all together as components and give them all different heights. So everything comes together and stacks correctly. Doesn't matter how many components you want to add here. We can keep adding more and more as we need to build up all the components that we need in the wall. When we have all of those components, so as an example, I'm going to take a look at this stone veneer and edit its properties. So we can take a look at the stone veneer. Each component that's in a wall is going to have its own properties that define it. So under the size component, I can see that it's going to be a finish. And it's a fixed width. That's 3.5 inches wide. Again, just like previous versions, we can put in an R value to that, so we get that overall energy efficiency audit at the very end. Each component can have its own calculated R value. In previous versions, it was 1 R value for the full thickness of the wall. Now we tell it what it is for each component. So when I use stone again in another wall, it will remember the R value, and I don't have to recalculate everything. It brings those forward for me, and it contains all of that information. The appearance, what does it look like? What material? That really hasn't changed, but it is done by per component at this time. And then the line work of that component. What does it look like when I'm looking at the surface of that component? And what does it look like when it's in plan and section views? So each component can have its own hatch pattern assigned to it as well, and its own layer. Each component also creates its quantity information. So when I put this component into the overall wall, it's going to grab all of the quantity information that's attached to this wall. So I have my stone veneer, and I'm going to include that in the quantities, and I'm going to get a square footage of stone when I apply this stone to a wall. I can add an assembly to this component of the mortar sand, and any wall ties that I also want to add in. So every time I add this stone veneer component to a wall, I'll know how much square footage of stone I'm going to require, and also the mortar stand, and the wall ties. Those will all get added into the wall for me. They're part of this wall component. I'm going to click OK here, and OK, and back my self boat. So each one of these various components is going to have its own information. They're each listed here as a component, and I can edit their information to find out more information about them. Again, they can have their own R values, their own appearance, their own line work. If we wanted to apply a hatch pattern to them, they could have that. And each one knows what wall type or wall line they want to have. And under quantity, they get their component value. I'll find out the sheathing. Now, this could be the square footage of OSB required. If I wanted to get the area of that and what's the square footage of OSB I'm going to need. And then attached to that, going along with my sheathing, I've added in sheathing tape and house wrap, the nails, the pneumatic nails I'm going to need to attach that to my framing, and staples to apply the house wrap to that sheathing. So all the different components that you have will all add together and be put in there. Now, all of the assembly information, all the quantity information, those are, as always, available in Building Essentials and Construction Suite. Pro Architect doesn't have and has never had the quantity information, so that you won't see that if that's the product that you're currently using. But if you are using Building Essentials and Construction Suite, you will have the extra quantity information going along with each component. Why is that important, that each component is grabbing its own quantity information, is because of the different heights that we're putting them to. So when I'm looking at the square footage of siding that I'm going to have versus the amount of stone I'm going to need, I need to grab that from that component because they're all at different heights. So that makes it more accurate in my quantity by putting everything together with quantities and putting them as a component in at the right height, stacked correctly, appearing correctly in my model, and quantifying correctly for me as well. So all these components, you can add different components, and you can move them up and down in the list. So if I wanted to move the stone or move my drywall, if I had different finishes, I can move them in the list in their order of appearance from inside to outside. So the very interior material that I'm going to see is my drywall, and the very exterior material that I'm going to see is my stone, and I can move them around as I need to. Okay, so those are components, and that changes up how we draw walls now. The walls themselves are based on those components that we're building. And if I slip to that quantity page, you can see the assemblies that were part of those components automatically get fed into the walls assemblies list. They'll show here so you can see them in blue and you understand where they're coming from. Those are my drywall components. My 2x6 wall insulated core materials are here. And then I have my house wrap and sheathing tape. I don't edit them here. You can see that that's grayed out. I have to go back to the component because these are assembled materials of that component. So I would go and change that component so it updates here. You can still add more assembled products here. If I wanted to add more assemblies and add more items, I can add more items in here as well to my quantity list. Okay, so that takes us through the new exciting parts of walls, but I want to show you and kind of illustrate how this is important in different ways. So we've looked at this wall right here, understanding that the stone comes up 4 feet, and then above the stone, I have my siding, so I get the appearance correct. And I'm just going to shuffle over here to the right. And we can see now that because they're in separate components and that they can have different heights, we can also peel back layers in the wall. So if you ever wanted to have a view where you could peel back the layers and show the siding sitting on top of the sheathing, sitting on top of the studs and the insulation within that core, you can do that now because everything is a separate component. So you can peel back the layers in a wall to illustrate what's going into that wall itself. As long as that is a separate component, like the siding to the sheathing to the structural wall component, they're all separate and they can all be peeled away. So you can see those within that. I'm also going to step inside a kitchen that I drew up for today's class as well. And this also helps us to illustrate when we're looking at walls with tile. So this wall itself has tile starting at the countertop. You can see the line there that's dividing that up. Below that, there is no tile. And over to the right-hand side, we have the wall that has no tile below the countertop, but then it has tile up 4 feet above that, and then there's wallpaper above that. So now by having them as separate components, that tile is going to quantify correctly as well. You can start and stop the tile where you need to show it, so it quantifies correctly. I know exactly how much square footage of tile I'm going to have, and it also appears correctly in your models as well, so you can show tile just where you need it in the model itself. Also part of the walls and looking here at the window, we've also spent some time when we look at the walls, and I'm going to look at the properties of that wall. That wall itself has a trim page, but you can see the trim itself. This page is different than it has been in previous versions. All the trim is put in by packages. So the trim is packaged together and placed on the wall itself. We did that packages because we wanted to be able to have a default trim for the entire model. So it's not just done by the wall's properties, but by the properties of the entire project. So when I'm looking at this entire project, it tells me the type of trim that I'm going to have, and it's going to apply that to every single wall. So I don't have to go in and add the trim to every single wall and change it if I have different trims from the past. I can universally change the trim package here in my settings. It'll make it more efficient for you. So if I select the trim package, maybe someone went with the base package, and then they've upgraded through time and they want to add the plus package. You can have all of your trim packages from your builder basic all the way up to your premium trim packages that you have available. And when someone wants to select and see the trim, it's now just a matter of changing that trim package, and the overall change happens in the entire project, so they can see the different trim packages around the doors, around the baseboard, just by coming in here and changing it. You don't have to do it on every single wall separately, which was time consuming. So this will save you a lot of time just in applying different trims through there. So you can have trim packages for the interior and a trim package set to the exterior as well. And that becomes your default. But you can override that default. So if I pick on a single wall and look at its properties, back at that trim page where we saw the packages first appearing, I can edit that trim package and change things about it on this one wall. Or I can remove that entire package on this wall and have no trim on this wall itself. So just by clicking on edit here, it allows me to go through and change the trim package that I want to associate to this wall. So I might want to, on the exterior, right now I have the stone package, I might be changing everything to PVC exterior trim on this wall. And it would update just this one wall to be the PVC trim. And I would click OK. And then on the interior, I could remove that. I could edit it just like I wanted to, or I can pick here on advanced. Advanced recognizes that when I'm looking at that wall, it's got the trim here listed on the bottom. It tells me there its behavior. So I can say for this particular wall, I don't want the baseboard, exclude the baseboard, but include the casing on the window. I don't need casing on this wall because this wall has been updated to just have the cabinets in front of it. So I don't want to show just, I don't need the trim, the base trim on that package. I just need it on that one. So I would just open that one package and have it in there on just that one wall. Okay, so that saves a lot of time, and it also makes it more accurate as well, so that you can just have that one wall doesn't have it. It won't include it. So you want to ensure that it doesn't include it in your quantities, because if you had trim running around the entire building, but cabinets sitting in front of it, it really wouldn't be included. So we want to make sure that that's as accurate as possible. So we make sure that it's excluded from that one single wall that it has it on. Okay, so that's looking at trim. So we can change the trim and have it customized per wall, and we can have trim packages throughout the entire model. I'm going to slip back out now and look outside my building, and I'm going to put this into a 2D view. What I want to illustrate when I do put this back into 2D is that I have a full stone wall and a wall that has different finishes attaching to it. So when I'm looking at that wall, and I'm just going to turn off the framing and come into this corner, I can tell it how those finishes come together. Because we're having siding going into brick and siding, or vice versa, or a full stone wall going into stone and siding, how do we show how that corner comes together? So we can do that by clicking on the wall itself. And when we're in that wall, we can come up here. I'm actually going to do this by corners here. I'm going to modify the system intersection. So I can pick on the intersection that I want to change and right click. And it says, okay, do you want to miter the finishes here? Or do you want to finish it off in a straight line at that corner? How do those different materials come together? Do they miter, or do they come in flush at that point? So you can choose either one, and I could come to this corner, same options. I could say, just finish that one off straight, coming down, don't miter it, and have that come through. So each corner can have that configuration, recognizing that when we have different materials coming together, we need to show and illustrate how they do come together. Are they mitered, or is it a finish? And if I pick on another corner back here, let's go to our intersections, modify intersections. We can miter or finish those ones as well. When we look on the interior walls, so if I click on intersections, modify the system intersections, and pick on an interior wall, and I pick that one, I can miter or finish it off as well. So it's not just our exterior, but it's our interior. We also recognize T intersections. So I have a T intersection happening here. So if I modify my system intersections, how do these three play together? I can make one of them my highest priority. And if it's my highest priority and it's set to miter, then it will miter itself at that corner. And then I can go to the other one and tell it to make it my lowest priority or decrease it, and then finish it. And with my last one here, make it my highest priority or increase its priority above one of the other ones, miter finish. So 3 different wall types coming together. How are we going to finish those materials and show them finishing correctly? Now we have the new modify system intersections, so you can illustrate that correctly on how that's actually going to happen in your project itself. With the walls, I'm going to jump into a view here. I have this wall, and you can see that it has wallpaper on it. I'm going to select that wall, and then I'm going to right click on that wall. A new feature that we have for walls is that we can flip them. So I can say change the wall orientation. So when I right click down near the bottom, you'll see wall orientation. That just flips the wall. So if I go back into our kitchen view, we can see that that wall is now wallpapered. So if you've ever drawn something on a wall, and before we had the left orientation and the right, and you put it on the wrong side of the wall when maybe you were in 2D and looking at the properties of this wall, you told it that you wanted to have the appearance on one side be Paint the Revere Pewter by Benjamin Moore, and on the other side of that, you wanted it to be wallpaper. And then you realize you change them up and you put it on the one side, not the other. That becomes handy then to change the wall orientation and flip it to the correct orientation that you wanted that wall to have. That will also be true for trim that you might apply to the wall itself. You can change the orientation there, flip the orientation. So maybe in one room you have um, full trim on the wall, and then the other one, it might be in a closet and you just have baseboard trim, very simple in there, but you put it on the wrong side of the wall. Just flip the orientation at this point. When we go to create our working drawings, it takes a 2D view of our model and it puts it out onto our working drawing sheets. And when it does that transfer from the model onto our worksheets, and if I flip out to a worksheet right now and I've got a view out here, it changes them and puts them all on different layers. So every line in here is a different layer. And you can see up here in the left-hand side that as I pick a different part of that wall, it changes what layer that is. And because it has them all on each individual layers, when it brings out all of those 2D lines that you can print, it means you can have different wall line definition to each line. So on the exterior, if you wanted this to be a very light line, but you wanted your stud lines to be a heavier line weight, you can do that. What we've done is, and that's always been true for Envisioneer, we've always had that capability. But what we've done in our drafting settings is added a few more components to that so that when we send our model out onto that working drawing sheet, we now include 2D openings and 2D windows and 2D doors so that they're separated. Previously, when they went out, the lines that are cut to incorporate the window or the door or the opening had the same layer as the overall wall. Now we've given those separate components and separate layer capabilities so your working drawings can have even more personalization to them so that you can have that nice look that is different on the line weights for each component that you have. So you can personalize it and meet any office standards that you have and make sure that everything looks just perfect when you go to print your working drawings. I'm going to go into a section view of our model. And when I go into this section view, something that you'll notice right away, if you have had a previous version of Envisioneer, is that I have put a hatch pattern attached to the walls when I go into section view. So in this section view, where there was tile, I have put a simple tile hatch pattern on that wall. And inside the wall, where I had my core, I put a hatch pattern in there to illustrate batt insulation. And with both of them, you can see that I've added a color behind it as well. So if I look at the properties of this wall and I go to the lined work option, each component that makes up this wall will appear in this list. So all of those components, if you add more components, they're just going to add themselves into this component list because it has to understand how you want each component to look when you go to cut a section or see it in plan view. Do you want it to have a heavy line weight? Do you want it to have a certain color? So each component grabs that from here. Each component also looks at a hatch pattern that can be associated to it. So when I'm looking at my tile surface, when I'm in a 3D view that might have a view of the tile and I'm in a hatch pattern view, I'll be able to see that pattern that I've attached to it. And down below that, you see the hatch pattern color. So the line work that's involved in that hatch pattern all has this black color. But there's a background color that's behind it, and that's this gray color. So if you really want to illustrate how something's going to look, and maybe the tile itself is teal, or it's fuchsia, or it's gray, or any color. Change the background color to give that illustration of what that color is going to be, and then apply your hatch pattern on top of it. And this is for hatch pattern views. So this will go into your working drawings. So when we go to see this wall in a section, or we want to see it in an isometric view with a hatch patterns applied, we'll be able to see these colors and these distinctions of these different materials. And you can see that it recognizes where that tile starts and where it stops. So this is the entire wall, but it recognized that that tile starts at the top of that countertop and goes up full height on this side and only 4 feet on this side. And that's the part that has the hatch pattern and the color. And if we look at our wall itself, you can see I have a hatch pattern illustrating insulation, and I've put that into the wall itself. Okay, and then I can add a color there, and I've done that in my core on this wall that's not selected. I've added the pink there. So every wall can be different as well. I didn't add it into the wall behind me, but I did here on this wall where we've cut through. I've added that pink color as the background color. Okay, so that gives you a little bit more distinction in your walls, looking at the hatch patterns that you can attach to each individual component that makes up the wall, and also applying that background color to them as well. You can add a lot more information visually to your sections and your isometric views now. I understand where the tile starts and stops. I understand that I'm going to be using batt insulation inside this wall. And those can be any colors as well. The walls themselves, and the reason I can see the section view here and see the insulation, we've never been able to do that before. When we cut a section previously, we had to take an extra step and apply batt insulation through the wall to show it in the wall. But now our walls themselves are upgraded to be solid modeling based walls and sections. So it understands within the solid piece of this stud component that's in the wall that it has that hatch pattern associated to it. So by having those section views, now you don't have to do that extra work of applying those hatch patterns when you transfer your model into the working drawings in a section view. As long as the component itself has that hatch pattern attached to it, because it's now a solid and we cut through it, it will show that hatch pattern for you. So that'll save you time not having to show that batt insulation or rigid insulation within the components itself. And you can see looking forward here, my stone has a pattern to it, and so does my sheathing as well. So each one of those can have a hatch pattern associated to it. I'm going to put this back into 2D. Now, in our view here, in a plan view, we have what we call a cut plane. So that I cut my model in half to understand what it looks like in a plan view looking down. But when we get into looking at walls that have stone on the bottom and siding on the top, what do you want to illustrate in your plan views? Would you rather show the stone, or would you rather show the siding? Well, now under our settings and building locations information, we have a 2D cut height, and you can set that at every location. So in our ground floor location, I've set that at 4 foot and 9/16 of an inch. If I wanted to move that up or down, so I wanted to either show the stone that's below or the siding up, I can change that value, and then that will cut it lower or higher in my view. And when you're cutting that cutting plane, that'll also affect your cabinets that you have there as well, and where you're cutting and showing them. So you can change that cut height, that 2D cut height, for your plan views, and that'll help you to illustrate your walls better on which material you're actually showing when it's in a plan view. We've been through over a half an hour of different features already. I'm going to step inside and show you some more. I'm going to come into this room here, and I'm going to go to View, Framing, Display the Framing. This framing view and the ability to edit the framing, again, is only in our Building Essentials and our Construction Suite software. But what I wanted to illustrate is ceiling framing. We've updated our ceiling framing to better reflect how the ceiling is going to be framed itself. So I'm just going to put this into a rendered outline view so we can see those individual ceiling joists coming up in that cathedral and meeting itself along that ceiling ridge that's coming down the middle of my room as well. So we've updated those features here for ceiling framing. And again, that's a Building Essentials and a Construction Suite function in the software itself. View, Framing, Display out but the framing. And I'm going to step back into our kitchen. When you're building out a kitchen or you have a custom surface that you want to use. So right now, the countertop in over the island, I've drawn that up as a surface. So instead of using the material, so if I look at the properties of a cabinet, cabinets have under their detail options to show the countertop. So that'll automatically be applied, and it follows the shape of the cabinet below it. But in a situation like having an island, you might want to overextend it by a set distance. And by doing that, you use a surface. So the surfaces tool is found up here. It's great for any horizontal extra surface that you need to be either flat or even on a slope. Our countertop over our island is completely flat, but you could use this surface for maybe even on the exterior for a driveway or any other option. Previously, when you've used a surface, and I'm going to look at the properties of this countertop, you either had to define it as a roof surface, a ceiling surface, or a floor surface. So when you were creating your working drawings, it became a little awkward at times because I wanted that countertop to show, but I wanted my floors turned off or my ceilings turned off. And if I turned them off, the ceilings and the floor off went my countertop as well. So now what we've done is we've added in this none option. It's not a roof surface type. It's not a ceiling surface type. It's not a floor surface type. It's its own surface type. So because it's not associated to either of those options that are there, you'll now see that there's separate view filter option just for the surfaces. So I can turn off just that surface and it disappears. I don't have to shut off my floors. I don't have to shut off my ceilings. I'm just turning off the surfaces. Or I can keep it on and turn off my floors and my ceilings, and it's not going to disappear on me. So for those of you that have taken advantage of the surfaces tool, you'll find that that's a great advantage now. For those of you that have never used the surfaces tool, it's a fantastic tool, and I invite you to use it. And it is available in all of our products. So right from Personal Architect up to Construction Suite. So you can use it and view filter it off in any of those products as you need to. I'm going to put this back down into a 2D view. And I'm going to turn off that framing that we've turned on when we turned on our ceilings there. And in our plan view, you can see that I've inserted some outlets. I've inserted some switches. Now new with version 17, I can go up to Tools, Analyze, and go to Schedules. And now you'll see an electrical schedule. So in my electrical schedule, I can come in and set up whatever information I want to have show up. So I've just had a description. What is the product? What is the count? And any notes that I want to add into the schedule itself. And here's all the different content that you can have. So you can have what type it is, and it grabs all that different information from the actual product itself, and it will appear. So now I'll just click OK there. And for notes, I can say my duplex place at 4-foot height. So I can add that note in. And then when I click OK, I now have my schedule. And if I zoom in on my schedule, it puts out the information, place at 4-foot height, my 12 duplex outlets, my double switch plate. I have all that information there. Okay, so you can add information with the electrical schedule and type it in, and now you have an electrical schedule that will get inserted onto your working drawing sheets. If you have Pro Architect, Building Essentials, and Construction Suite. For those of you that only have Personal Architect, you can generate this, but you can't put it obviously on a working drawing sheet. I'm going to zoom in on our windows here. Our windows are always been marked. You've had the ability to mark the windows. Probably about 4 versions now, we started being able to mark the versions. But what we've changed with that, I'm just going to move this window around here and look at its properties. With the windows itself, I'm going to change this window. Instead of being a 3650, I'm going to change this to a 4-foot by 5-foot window and click OK. And in the properties, it's going to go back in there of the quantity here. I can have a mark and I can tell it exactly what I want it to say. And that's what we've done previously. And now I'm going to set that to auto. And when I set it to auto, it'll automatically list it as a 4050. Before it would say 4-foot by 5-foot and 0 inches. Now it takes the more common standardization of the mark style and automatically places it in. So as you change your windows, as long as you've got it set to auto, it will automatically set that to 4050. With the windows and the doors, I'm going to select this window. Now that it's placed in there and I've changed it, I want to automatically center it on the wall. Before, centering on wall was only there when you were placing it initially in the wall. But now you can come through once it's in, so you can quickly place them and then go back and say, center that on the wall. Okay, so that'll give you flexibility. If you just want to place the windows in quick and easy, you're sitting in front of a client, you want to get them in, and then you know you need them centered later, you can just center them afterwards very quickly. Or if you change a window size and need and move things around, you can center it afterwards as well. Okay, I'm going to go back inside and go back into our kitchen. And I'm going to come over and take a look over here at our upper cabinets. The cabinet door handle is on this side right now. I go into the properties, and now for cabinets, I can change it to a right-hand side. So previously with cabinets, you could only have it as the one way. It was just placing it always in on the left, but now you can have it left or right. And the hardware will update accordingly as well. So when you're illustrating a kitchen, this just makes it more accurate and gives you that flexibility of putting in left-hand and right-hand cabinet doors. And then some behind-the-scenes things that we've done. IFC import and export has been, and if you've never done that, you can import an entire IFC model. So IFC is a standardized model, 3D model format. So you might find models out on the internet and they're in IFC format. You can bring them in and import that IFC file. And if it's an entire house and you bring it in, we'll recognize windows for windows and doors for doors and walls for walls. So you can completely bring it in and transfer it into an Envisioneer format. It's not going to be unintelligent, it's going to be very intelligent. We've updated our IFC background information so it recognizes more IFCs. Now, when you're bringing in an IFC, it is only as intelligent as the IFC that was created. So if they didn't put a lot of effort into their IFC file, we're only going to bring in the effort that they did. But if they put a lot of work into their IFC and separated windows from doors, from trim and everything along that line, we're going to recognize that too. And you can grab a complete model and have it in Envisioneer format very quickly and very efficiently. One of those exciting new features to be imported into Envisioneer is our own Personal Architect Online. You can export out a Personal Architect Online model and bring it in to Envisioneer to complete your working drawings. So if any of you are using our new cloud-based design tool to lay out a room, you can get the room laid out, drop it back here into Envisioneer, and you'll be able to complete the working drawings for that. So that'll be with version 17. When you can export your catalog and import it back in. For those of you that are using Envisioneer for material takeoffs, and you have put all of your formulas in there and you've got everything set and all of your different products, if you ever do any updates to those products, you can export the catalog out, update it in Excel if a SKU number changes or product description changes, and then import it right back in. And that will update the catalog. That previously didn't include a lot of the different framing elements, but now it does. So in version 17, when you export out the catalog, all of the different framing members are included and all of their different lengths will be sent out. And then you can update them and bring them back in. So for those of you that use it for material takeoffs and you need to update the catalog in descriptions, and then you can do that and bring it back in. This doesn't, when I export it out, it's just CSV format, and you bring that into Excel. So you can't change colors or 3D elements. It's just meant for the data behind all the objects that you're bringing in. We've also, when we import a SketchUp file through the Object Wizard, we're compliant with the latest SketchUp file format. So when you have version 17, you'll have the latest SketchUp file format as well. And when you're bringing in objects from SketchUp, previously transparent textures would not import, but they do now. And you can also optimize that import and will recognize single-sided elements. So if you've created something out in SketchUp and it only had a single side to it, we'll recognize that single-sided element and we'll bring those in as well. Previously, we did not bring those in. We've also added 100 new textures into the catalog, so you can see all different textures and lots of new blocks. So we've removed some of the older blocks and updated some newer blocks. So when you get the catalog, you'll see some refreshed items in Envisioneer as well. So I'm just going to go back out. So that is almost an hour's worth of new features that we covered. Starting tomorrow, you're going to receive an email. In that email, it will give you a link so that you can watch the webinar again. So if there's a feature that you wanted to see, hey, how did that work? The recording, you can watch that over again. It'll also give you a link to the version 17 page on our website. So you can look at all the individual features and read about them and how they're going to improve your workflow in Envisioneer and make it easier to work inside the software, more efficient to work inside the software, and also give you more professional looks to your working drawings and your 3D models as well. So that all comes tomorrow. So you'll be receiving an email from us that has a link so you can view the videos and you can also look at the feature list as well. Again, the software itself will probably start to ship in the next 30 to 45 days. This is just a preview for you to see what the new features are and get ready for those as well. The walls themselves, the ones that you've previously been using, you'll just be able to right-click and replace them with our new wall systems if you wanted to take advantage of them right away on a project that might be half complete. Just bring them into version 17, the the existing project and you can replace the walls with our new formatting if you want to. It will allow you to keep your old walls. They will exist. You can still see them in your project, but the new catalog will have our new walls to that. So I just want to go through and see if I can answer any questions. Someone said, I didn't know that suggestions could be made. I have an idea. How can I submit it so it reaches the right people? If you have a fantastic idea and think, oh my goodness, Envisioneer, if it had this, it would make my world so much easier. Please do send that to support@cadsoft.com. And by sending it to support@cadsoft.com, we'll take that idea. We take them all the time and we have a list of them. And we evaluate every idea that comes in. We take a look at it. How difficult is it programmatically to be able to develop that new idea? And how many people would really like to see this new idea? If all of our end users want to see a new feature in there, we'll do our best to get it in there for you. So please do send those into support@cadsoft.com. If you're using surfaces for the countertops, then did you remove the interior countertop? Yes, I did. I'll go back into the kitchen itself and illustrate that for you. So I'll just back up here. So for the cabinets that are underneath that surface, if I look at their property, you can see that it's just the box cabinet. There is not a countertop on top of it. I have went under the details page and unchecked show counter. So I won't get that in my quantity report. I just have the surface above that. So every cabinet, you can turn off the countertop for that. I have had a delay in Zoom. Can we yet apply a color to a pattern such as lap siding? Yes. If you're talking about a texture file, so there's a difference here, and I should illustrate that. So when I'm in my section view here, I'm looking at a hatch pattern with a color behind it. That's a hatch pattern view. And each hatch pattern can have a unique color behind it. If I'm out in a 3D view and I look at my model in a hatch pattern view, again, each one of these hatch patterns can have a color behind it. You can see this gray stone has a gray color behind that hatch pattern. The other ones don't at this point, but they could, absolutely. But if you're looking at the rendered view of the model, change this back to realistic, and I'm looking at this stone, and I'm looking at this siding, that is an actual texture file. Those texture files are a bitmap or a JPEG, and they're created with a very specific color in mind. So you can't change their color in here. You can replace them with a different texture. So I could come up to my material paintbrush, and if I wanted to change the color of this siding, I would take an eyedrop to find out what it is. It's siding number 24. And then I would tell it that I want to apply siding 17 to everything. And I would change that material to siding 17. So you can update and change the texture file, but you can't change the color of a texture file within Envisioneer. That has to happen in something like Photoshop or Illustrator to update a texture file. Thank you for building the software by components. Love that new feature. Thank you. Is there any improvements to rendering and ray tracing, also a type of discount for version 17? Rendering and ray tracing remains the same. So for those of you that when you go to render the software, you've got all of these controls in the background. We have videos that help you to get them to be very photorealistic. So if your renderings are coming out a little, and you're not really happy with the quality of them, watch the video. and make sure that you're setting these all to the highest level they can go to so that you get a really good rendering. Discounts will be sent in the email that comes out tomorrow. So watch for that email, and you'll get a link, and you'll also find out about discounts that are available. Is there a way for the auto size to also indicate the window type, casement, double hung, etc.? At this point, no, but what a great recommendation. I will put that in so that instead of just saying 3040, the windows will call out 3040, and on a line underneath that automatically, it will include casement for you as well. So at this point, it does not, but you could put in custom text that does allow for that extra piece of text as well, and then call it out as casement. Has the catalog with kitchen cabinets be updated to give customers a more up-to-date kitchen cabinet styles? Yes, we have. Some of the catalog work that you will see and that we're working on right now is updating cabinet styles and not styles, but colors, and updating the ones that are available there. So you'll see new cabinets in the default catalog. There will be more textures in siding and metal roofing. A question asked there. Is there anything with timber framing? Timber framing trusses, did that happen? At this point, no. No timber framing, but we do have pole barn videos on our website. You might want to check that out to see what we might offer in the way of timber framing already. How are the fasteners figured for the sheathing and the drywall? There are codes that are required for spacing around the edges and in the spacing and the field spacing. So when you're looking at fasteners, right now we do that by an assembly. So I do it by square footage. But we also, I'm just going to come back out here for a second and looking at the properties of a wall. Give me a second here to look at sheathing as an example. And just give me 2 seconds here as I bring up the... So when I'm looking at creating the quantity for something like the nails, the fasteners that are going to go in to the wall, we do that. We can do that by the area. And you'll also know that we have primary edges set here as well, opening edge length, secondary lengths, and stuff like that. So that might be helpful as well. So when I have an edge length and I know that edge length, I can divide that. So if you know that at every edge, you need to have 10 screws or a nail up every 2 feet along an 8-foot wall, you could take that edge length and then divide it by the spacing that you need, and then have an overall area as well. That might help. Try some different formulas to help you with those. Okay, next question. Also, the application of masonry to the exterior of the wall had no masonry ties. Okay, so things like masonry ties, those are done with the assemblies. So when we looked at the assemblies of that wall, let me go back out here and resume that share. When we're looking at the masonry components and the assemblies, we have our wall ties set there. So when we have those wall ties, we can set those a formula to how many you're going to need for the actual stone itself. So you can set those wall ties and have a formula for that as well. There should be a space allowed for the masonry, thus requiring a larger or different type of frieze over the top of it, back to the wall, and proper flashing up the wall. Are those materials included? Yes, you can. So when we're looking at the masonry, this wall as an example, see how we've got the top of it here? I'm just going to try to walk in here just to take a look at it. We've put a stone top on that so that it's got that top to that. So that's part of the trim package. And part of that trim package that we looked at for this wall, and I look at its properties and went to trim, we've got the stone rail. So when you have the stone set there, yes, you can set the stone above that, and that's part of your trim package. So make sure if you're using a stone wall and you need those to be added, make sure that you add those in. And you can put in a component called airspace. So if you need that to be a space for anything, you can always include an airspace as well. Okay, so let me now go to see what other questions we have. Will the version 17 be released in Australia as well? Yes, that will be a global release for anything that is in English. For those of you that might be joining in from any of the other countries that we do ship to in all the different languages, Envisioneer is available in French, in Mandarin, and in German. Those releases happen after the fact. We have to get the translations complete. But yes, Australia will be released at the same time. That seems to be all of our questions. I will leave it open in case there are any other questions. Otherwise, we will be able to answer all of your individual questions in a direct email. So if you do think of a question that comes out afterwards, please don't hesitate to contact us and send us an email to support@cadsoft.com if it's regarding a feature or a function, and we'll be able to answer that for you. If it's regarding a price or a discount, send that into sales@cadsoft.com, and they'll be able to answer those for you. Is there a way to freehand draw framing components such as purlin bracing, angle struts, and support beams? Yes, there is. So if you had a framing component that you need to add into your floor framing, or you need to add in anywhere, use our members command. The members command, I'm just going to pull it up here and copy an element. The members can be any shape that you need them to be. So if you need to have a set certain profile to a member that you had, maybe some bracing that you're going through, or you're doing some steel framing, you can change the appearance of that member and even do a custom profile. So if it is a very customized member, you can do a custom profile and then insert those individual members wherever they're required so that you can place those in. If it's something like a block that you needed to put in, as an example, under equipment here, we have different pieces of hardware like joist hangers and post caps. You can put those individually in where you need them to reside as well, hurricane ties, so that they become part of your model and you have them showing as well. Is there a way to add a frieze board as a trim in the gable to follow the underside of the gable? So glad you asked that. Yes, when we're looking at the trim, and I'm going to zoom over to this wall over here, this one right here. If I'm looking at this wall right here, I'm going to look at its properties, and I'm going to go to trim, and I'm going to add a trim package called this one that has opening and chair rail, siding trim. It has crown, baseboard. I'm going to click OK and click OK on that wall. And you can see that that trim went all the way up underneath that. Previously, it had stopped and went straight, but now we follow the wall shape itself. So glad you asked that question, and I could point that out to you. So that's another function feature of trim itself, that trim can be raked. And when you're raking the trim, because trim can be customized, you can have multiple components. So if I look at the properties of that trim again, I can go into advanced here and I can add in more packages than there as well. So in my crown, I just have 1x6 white PVC trim. But if I had another piece that went underneath it and maybe it was comprised of 3 separate pieces, all 3 can be up there in that crown as well. Okay, so you just set the type of it and what you're using, and then they can all appear there. So you can have multi pieces of trim at the crown or anywhere else and build up that trim and have it follow the rake too. In version 16, when using the building wizard, Envisioneer would add a wood framed floor at the footing level when I would create a house with a crawl space. This was in addition to the standard level 1 structure. Has this been fixed? So when you're creating, and let me just hit File and New here. When we're creating a house and we're using the building wizards, you specify the materials that you're using. So if I wanted it to have different materials in one way or the other, I would specify that. So if I go to the house builder and tell it that I am building a 2-story home and that I have a full basement, and click next, and I'll just do a simple one here. It's 30 feet. See all of the different materials that you have here, and when you're picking, if I go back here, foundation walls with crawl space, full basement, it has the foundation wall. It does not include the floor in the basement. Let me just hit finish in there. And we'll go down into the foundation level and place a camera there so I can understand what you've got going on there. So I've got, it takes the one material that you used above and it uses it below. And then you can go and hit replace and change that to concrete. Okay, so you have the concrete there. So because we only specify one flooring material, it will use that on all locations. Okay. Does background color work in walls in plan view? Let me go back to my model. Close. Coming back here. And going to a hatch pattern view. So in my hatch pattern view, I'll see my materials that I use. So I can see my insulation going throughout the model here. And if the wall itself, properties, and appearance, and my component there, it's the core wall, oops, line work, the core wall there can have a background color. I can make it magenta. So I've got magenta going there. So each one of these can have a color, okay? And you can see the color appearing in there for us. So yes, it appears in plan view and it appears in our sectional views as well. I'm glad you like the trim packages and the wall patterns. With the new walls in version 17, where is the roof overhang based off of? Because it was based off the edge of the core. It still is the edge of the core. So version 17 still recognizes that there is a core component to the wall. So if I look at a wall and I look at the component still has a core. So it will still recognize itself to that core. In version 16, when I inserted my model into worksheet space, sometimes the lines were missing, especially around window elements. has this been fixed? Because we're using now solids-based modeling, you'll see a big improvement and a big change when you bring your model from the model space into worksheet space. The lines will show up, and I showed you how we had those separate lines for all the different components now of the wall. Those will give you more distinction, and you'll be able to put hatch patterns to all of them. Okay, that's all the questions. I'm glad everyone liked version 17. Again, look out tomorrow for your email that'll give you a playback of today's video and a link to the version 17 website. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed version 17, and I look forward to shipping to you soon. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Bye-bye.